For scene 4, while we've gone into it quite a lot previously, we've never done it with the other two scenes as well, and we didn't go into it as deeply as we could have. So this is what we've done for scene 4 so far. So at the beginning of the scene, Bonnie is stood slightly outturned towards the rest of the audience and stood slightly further back than Joe. Joe is facing sideways onto the audience, facing towards Bonnie, and it's slightly further forward. This is to show that Bonnie is maybe slightly more secure in the situation and less awkward, as she's a lot more open, and Joe talks quite a lot, which shows that she might be quite insecure within it. There is a slow turn of Bonnie in the beginning to turn towards Joe, or at least to face forwards. This was partially to cover a pause in the lines, but also just to show the audience that they come in like a few moments after Bonnie's opened the door. As while Joe's first line is hello, it's quite obvious that it's not the first time she said hello, and it's not just after Bonnie's opened the door. For Bonnie, we thought that there would be a constant thought of I don't like fish, because she doesn't like fish, and I think that would be very forefront of her mind, and she wouldn't really be thinking about much else until after she said something about it, or after she's gotten over it. But I don't think it's something that she personally can get over. Therefore, whenever Joe mentions the fish, Bonnie has to have a reaction towards it, whether that be a subtle one or an obvious one. Well, it has to be subtle enough so Joe doesn't see it. It has to be obvious enough so the audience does. So we were thinking maybe like a grimace, or kind of like a jump back, sort of like facing away sort of thing. But we thought that Bonnie shouldn't look at Joe until Joe first mentions the fish, maybe not often in between mentioning the fish. And even then, when she is looking at Joe, she's mainly concentrating on the fish and not Joe herself, as she cares more about not having the fish and not liking fish more than she cares about Joe in that moment. On page 49, there's quite a lot of subtext throughout the three scenes. So the main two parts of it is surprise and just needing a minute to recuperate and think. So the first time this happens was after Anna says dad towards John. Well, this is quite surprising for John, as he hasn't heard that in a long time. And this is reflected in Bonnie's scene when Bonnie says, I'm a bit surprised. This is like the subtext between the two of them to tell the audience that John is very surprised. This is then reaffirmed with John's next few lines, which is him sort of like stuttering, saying that he hasn't heard her say that in years. The next part of it is just constant throughout it, with Carol saying, can I have a minute? She says this twice. Both times in Anna's scene it comes back with someone saying no. This is to show that in all three of the scenes, Carol, John and Bonnie all want a minute just to think and just recuperate, but they're not allowed that with their other people. For Carol, she wants a minute because she's quite overwhelmed by the house that they're going to move into, or that they're looking round. And this is the house that's throughout the three scenes, and it's where they've all grown up in. So it's quite a big, important scene for it. But Dave isn't allowed to leave her on her own legally, so he has to say no, but he doesn't want to because he's an estate agent, so he still wants to sell a house. For Anna's scene, John wants a minute just to think about what Anna's just said, but Anna won't let him because John just has turned up here uninvited, or maybe not uninvited, but never specifies that Anna knew he was coming. And so it's just John and Anna, to be fair, both wanting to think about everything that's happened, try and get into thoughts properly, and try and sort them into sentences that they can then say to each other without just stumbling over their words constantly. And then in Bonnie's scene, it's Bonnie just trying to deal with the fact that Joe brought a fish, and she's just incredibly surprised by the fact that she brought one, and surprised that Joe is there because she did turn up uninvited, which is specified later when Joe says that she turned up uninvited. The next part we were thinking about is when Bonnie and Joe say things back to back. While this is a lot faster than the rest of the scene, it can't be too fast because then the other scenes can't catch up and think about where we are. It also needs to be slow enough so that the audience can understand what is happening. But we just need to balance out the two speeds and figure out which is best. The next part is everyone speaking at once. We just have to figure out the timings for this and which one is most important. We thought that Carol's was most important as she's buying the house that affects the next 2 generations. So we made hers louder and the other two slightly quieter, especially because Carol's getting quite angry at this point. However, in Anna's and Bonnie's scenes, they both got 1 or 2 words back and forth between the two characters. So that can go a lot quicker, whereas in Carol's, it's just a big paragraph that she says. So we need to try and sort out the timings while not making Anna's and Bonnie's scene unrealistic. However, there is quite a big gap in Carol's scene between the end of her speech and Dave's next line, which means that we do have a little bit of leeway. It just takes the person playing Dave to go along with where we're up to and make sure he comes in at the right time. There's then a sort of waterfall technique along the 3 scenes. So Carol says one line, then Anna, then Bonnie. I think this is to show that it affects, what Carol does affects Anna and what Anna does affects Bonnie. As in to show that everyone affects each other and that what they do can influence what happens in the future. I think this is quite a clever technique from Alice. It can also reaffirm into the audience's mind as this is one of the first scenes. This is still one of the early scenes, so the audience doesn't fully understand that it's a grandmother, mother and daughter. So this is used to reaffirm that that is the case and hint it towards the audience that that's what's happening. There is a pause at the bottom of page 54 after Anna says, "I don't think I can come back to that house." This is a very important line as she's talking about the house that Carol's looking around at the moment. So we added a pause in just after that, and Bonnie's line is next. So I just have to make sure that I don't come in straight away, and I have to leave a suitable length pause, but not too long, otherwise it just becomes slightly awkward. And then the next bit, we have to create the timings and the importance of the lines between Anna's and Bonnie's scenes, because they're speaking in time again. I think we figured that Anna's lines were more important because she's talking about staying in rehabilitation over the drug use that was caused by Carol's death, whereas Bonnie and Joe are more stumbling over their words and figuring stuff out in their relationship. So Anna's will be slightly louder. However, Bonnie has quite an important line at the beginning of that part, which is her saying that she doesn't like fish. This is the first time that she says it in the whole scene. So this is a very important line as it shows Joe why she's acting the way she is. So while that one has to be louder than the rest of the scene for Bonnie, Anna's is louder overall in that part. The next part there are 3 I don'ts that are simultaneous: Carol's, Anna's and Bonnie's. The way Bonnie says it has to be quite harsh because she's saying that she doesn't like fish. The way Anna and Carol says it is just quite emotional. So you have to try and balance that out and make sure that Bonnie's isn't too loud so the audience doesn't lose what Anna and Carol are going through. But we also have to make it so it's obvious that Bonnie is being quite harsh in that situation. So Bonnie then brings a subject up out of nowhere because she says it was just sex. But that is out of nowhere. There's no hint towards that from Joe. I think this is because Bonnie doesn't pick up on social cues very well, and maybe slightly and have a learning difficulty like autism or Asperger's. This is also hinted throughout the rest of the play with her not being able to tap into emotions very well and reflect on other people's emotions. As in scene 5 with Tim, they're talking about a little girl that died, and she doesn't take it the way that most people would take it, as in very emotionally and carefully. She just takes it as the facts. So I think that's the first hint that she might have autism. This is also reaffirmed a little bit later when she says that she isn't hungry. This is very much factual, that she just genuinely isn't hungry, rather than a way of telling Joe to go away. She wants Joe to be there, she just doesn't want food at that moment. So the next part is when Joe starts talking about how she likes Prince. There is a very small gap between Bonnie's line and Joe's line about Prince, but we've added in a turn for Joe, as if she's about to go away, then she suddenly thinks of it, turns back, and is like, I have something to say, I'm going to say it, just to add in something extra because I don't want to go away just yet. This was something for the person playing Joe to think about more than anything. But it's also quite an interesting thing to add, as Joe is very much just saying what she thinks. But in this case, it seems more like she's thought about what she's saying, even though it doesn't have much relevance. Later on, she says she invites Bonnie to come join her in a dance class, which I think it's Joe's way of asking Bonnie out again, as in, I want this to go further, I don't want it to be just that one time we had sex. The final thing is when Joe leaves and then comes back for the final words she has to say to Bonnie. This is because there was a very big gap, as it's when John says his speech to Anna. So we weren't really sure what to do in that gap between Joe and Bonnie. So we decided that Joe could leave, and then as if she got halfway down the street, realised that she has this one final thing she has to say to Bonnie, and then she can leave for good. So then she leaves the stage and then comes back on and then just starts speaking, like letting her heart out sort of thing. I think this finally gets through to Bonnie, as at the end Bonnie then goes to kiss Joe as if to say, yes, okay, you can stay, like we can be together, it's not just that one time. I think that's Bonnie's way of getting things done, is just doing things rather than saying things, because I'm not sure she has a way with words as such, as she always gets confused and always says the wrong thing according to other people. So yeah, that's what I thought about scene 4, and that's what we've gone into in class.